Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today we'll be detectives trying to solve a murder using action selection and deduction via the tiny Epic decoder system in a competitive, cooperative, or solo mode. Tiny Epic Crimes is a crime-fighting noir game for 1 to 4 players. It's for ages 14 and up. It takes 30 to 60 minutes to play, and it's published by Gamelyn Games. Now it's on Kickstarter right now, so I'm going to show you how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side. This is a Kickstarter preview, so all the art and components you see here are prototypes. They're not final. To see all the most up-to-date art and components, check the Kickstarter link in the description of this video. Now here is the city that you'll be working in to try to solve the crime, and it is set up in a random way each game. Now there's multiple ways to play the game. Standard way is competitive. You're trying to be the first one to find who committed the murder. But you're still gonna have to work a little bit with other players to do so. There's a cooperative version, fully, and there's a solo mode. I'm gonna use the standard mode as the method of teaching the game and then show you very briefly at the end the difference between some of the other modes. Now there's 16 possible suspects, and as you can see, they're split up into 2 big sections. We have the blue bee suspects and the red rhino suspects, but each of these suspects also have other attributes. For example, their getaway, was it a motorcycle or a car? Forensics, was it a footprint or a thumbprint? Which weapon was it, knife or gun? Which rank are they? And we already just talked about which gang they're from, the blue bees or the red rhinos. Now I already showed you that the difference between the red rhino and blue bee suspects. By the way, this is a player aid that every player will have. But there's also all these other aspects that we just talked about, like their rank. Are they a boss or are they an underboss? That's the rank right there. And it shows you the weapon, the getaway, and the forensics. So there are all those different combinations, and each suspect is the only one to have that very specific combination of attributes. Now at the beginning of the game, one of these suspects is secretly and randomly going to be placed into this, and that is the murderer that you're trying to find. You'll also be able to select which detective you are, and you'll take that player to track your rank and such, and see what actions are available to you throughout the game. Now each player will have an asymmetric ability. You actually get 2 to choose from at the beginning of the game, but you'll keep one. Like for example, when you're driving, you'll be able to move from one corner of the city block to any other corner for just one time. So you'll have a little bit something different about you that gives you some different strategies throughout the game. Right now I have the game set up for a 3-player game, and each of them have a car that starts in the headquarters. And this is the only tile in the game that starts in the same spot every time, where everything else is randomized. Now the game is an action selection game, and you're going to be taking actions that require a certain amount of time. And as you go through, you're going to go through days and nights and days and nights, and then towards the end you're going to be trying to obviously solve it and accuse the suspect and be correct. The first thing you do is drive. You can spend some time to drive around. It's not mandatory, but after you do or don't do that, you'll be taking one of these actions depending on whether it was daytime or nighttime, as I mentioned. So let's look at what a typical turn might look like. I might be this car, and I might drive 1. It's going to be 1 time to go here. You can go as many as you want orthogonally, and each one is going to cost you 1 hour on the time track. Now I'm here with a mobster. There's 3 different types of mobsters in the game. There's red, blue, and gray. But I'm here, and over in this row here, we'll see that we have an informant token there. And that token matches this here, and it's daytime, we can catch an informant. And since I'm on the same block as a mobster, and in this row there's still an informant, I could spend 2 hours to arrest this mobster and collect the informant token. Now when you arrest those mobsters, they go back in this bag. They'll be coming out into the board a little bit later. You're trying to keep them off the streets. We'll talk about why later. But optionally I drove, and I took this action. You can only take 1 action of these types during the game, and then of course specific to what time of day it is, day or night. So before we go through the rest of the flow of a turn, let's talk about why are you trying to catch this? Why would you do these different actions? Because there were 5 of these out to the side of the board as you saw, and if you get the last one of these, as you can see, that player, whoever did the last one, the 5th one, will get to find out the rank of the murderer. So whoever was the last one to get an informant, they would secretly take it out from here, not look at it, put the suspect in here. And of course, it's the 5th informant, not just the last player that did it, but whoever got the last one. Now they are going to secretly flip this over, and they will be able to see, I don't know if you can with the lights here, but you will be able to see which rank they are. You can see that symbol right there. Now that symbol corresponds with this one, bosses. So I secretly know, I'm the only one that knows this right time, that it's got to be one of these 4 or one of these 4. I've just narrowed down the suspects in half because I know that this is their rank, so they gotta be either one of these 4 or one of these 4. Once I've looked at that, I will put this back over where no one can see it, and I would put it back in the murderer envelope. Also, the player that got to see that will take this. That lets everyone know that they're the one that, that knew the rank. They're the one that figured that out. That'll be important a little bit later. But everyone else, you say, well, if the last person gets to look at it, why would I even bother working together to get these things? Because after they get to look at that rank, everybody that's had at least one of these or helped catch informants gets to draw a suspect card, including the person who finished it. Now, when you get these suspects cards, you will secretly, again, you'll flip it over, you won't show anybody, and you can see which person this is. Now, again, with the lights, I'm not sure if you can see this, but essentially this is Olive Oyster. So for example, if we had seen Olive Oyster, we know it's not this one right there. And if we were the one that actually knew the rank, we already had it narrowed down to these 4 and these 4. Now we know it's not that one. Now you can either decide to play with no notes or take notes, whatever the group decides. Now I spent 1 hour driving because I only went 1 block away, and then I spent 2 hours arresting, so I went 3, so that is me on this time track. Then it'll be the next player. If they're tied, the next one on top goes. Let's say they spent an hour, and let's say this player spent 4 hours. Well, it's now the orange player's turn. So maybe they spend 2 hours, right? It's still their turn. Let's say they spend 2 more. Then it's our turn. So it works like time tracks that you've seen in other games. Now the last thing you do on your turn is check for mobsters by rolling a die. We have a white 4 and a black 1. There's no mobster there. We'll place one. And you're trying to keep it clean because you don't want to run out of mobsters. We'll talk about that later. But there are some other things that might happen. You might not place a mobster if you roll a 6. You'll notice there's no 6 on either edge of the board. Or if you roll a double 3, which is the headquarters, you don't put a mobster out there either. But if you roll doubles like this in 2-2, there's no mobster, we'd place one and then you'd roll again. So sometimes you can get a bunch more mobsters. Now again, we're trying to keep them clean because if we ever need to place a mobster and there's none left in the bag, we actually get an extra event, which is bad. Now the game starts with a random event, and there's all sorts of different things that may happen. Like right now, this is a motorcade. Now we have placed a motorcade on a corner city block. Now as you can see, we've placed that token right here. Now what we're trying to do is get this back to headquarters, and any player that's orthogonally adjacent to it can bring it towards them. And so players are gonna be trying to get next to it, bring it all the way to headquarters. So it's essentially causing you to, do things that might not be in the best interest of yourself, but you're trying to do it because until this is resolved, nobody can take a stakeout action. But if you do escort it, you get to move, that's how you finish it. You escort it, you get to gain a force card. Sometimes you'll be gaining suspect cards and learning more and things like that. But you don't want too many events to come, because if there's ever 3 events and you're supposed to get another one, you actually will discard a suspect card, meaning there's information about the murder that you will not get to see. This is important because all players might lose, which is why you are sort of working together, but you're really out for yourself. Now that event card mentioned gaining a force card. Now you actually get to start the game with a force card, but there's different ways like events that allow you to gain force cards, and these allow you to do all sorts of things. Like you can move to a city block on or adjacent to another's officer's cards, or you play instead of driving normally. So it just kind of tells you when you use them. But there's another important why you're trying to be the one to actually finish this event. Because when you do, not only will this discard it, make it a little bit nicer for everyone else, but when you complete an event, you can look at an attribute that someone else has already figured out. Now remember, there's different ways to gain suspect cards. Some of the events allow you to gain a suspect card. And by gaining a suspect card, essentially you are learning which person that murderer is not, of course, by looking at that in the red decoder. Now, if you finished an event and someone else was the person that figured out rank, they had taken this token because they already had looked at rank, you can give that player a suspect card of your choice. You will give it to them, giving them information. You might be able to give them information you already know that they have, which is kind of cool. Or you're kind of, bringing them along with you. You're giving them a little bit of information, but now you get to take this and look at the rank, and now you know exactly what that player knew. So doing events is pretty good, and that's kind of how you work a little bit with other players to try to get to the end result. Now certain things in the game, like if you get an informant, will allow you to move up your rank. As you move up rank, you'll be getting things like force cards, which we already talked about, or investigating other players, where you can randomly take a suspect card that another player has and look at it, but then you got to give it back to them. So you're going to be wanting to move up rank to learn more information. Now again, on your turn, you're going to be possibly driving, then taking one of these actions, depending on your daytime and nighttime, then you're going to be rolling for the mobsters. Now there are times that new events come out. Now you'll see these red lines that has the event icon on it, when someone is taking their turn and they get to this point and they have crossed that line, the first player that does it, this line for example, a new event would come out. And they do all different things, putting out tokens. In this case, it's an arsonist at large. It tells you what you can't do or what hindrance you have and how you essentially finish the event. And again, gain a suspect card. And again, finishing events is good because of all the reasons I've told you before. But that's one of the ways they do come out. So how do you learn about these other attributes? It's typically by taking these actions, again, whether you're in daytime or nighttime, for example, searching the scene. If you're at a spot that has one of these tokens, you can spend 2 hours and you can gain this token. Some of them are X's. It's actually 7 tokens. In order to find out the forensics, we need 3 check marks. So 3 of them have an actual check mark on them. So this one does not. If you were checking, this one does not. If you were checking some of these, you might get one that's like this. Now, either way, you keep this token because remember, you may have gotten this one here. That was not it. It's okay. You keep this because when the 3rd one is finally found, you're going to be able to gain a suspect card again. So there's different. You're always getting something eventually for helping out the investigation. Now remember, you're only taking 1 action on your turn, but you might call for backup. This is a good way to get rid of a bunch of mobsters. I am authoritatively adjacent to 2 of them, and I'm going to say how many hours I want to spend. I might spend 3 hours. Now if I roll a 3 or less, then I have done that. I've called for backup, and they will get removed. Anything that's orthogonally adjacent to me, mobsters like that, and they go back in the bag, cleaning the streets. Now on success, you'd also get a force card, which we've already talked about. But if you were not successful, like if I said I'm only going to spend 2 hours, but I roll a 5, then if let's say there was somebody here, you would still arrest the one on your block, but not any of the additional ones. If it's nighttime, you might want to catch a witness. Now that's very similar to catching an informant. You would essentially arrest any mobster on your block, and you can spend 2 time to do that, arrest the mobster, and you can catch the witness right here. And again, once all 5 witnesses are caught, well, you'll be able to find that attribute out. Or maybe you want to do a stakeout. Now the stakeout works similarly to how we search the scene, but instead of rolling a die, you're going to flip the token. So you can say, I'm going to spend 2 time. And if I flip this over, if this is 2 or 1, then it's successful. If it was not, it would not have been successful. If it was successful, I'd take it. If it wasn't, I would leave it on the block. The last action you could possibly take is bring in for holding. Now you can spend 2 hours and arrest a mobster on your block, and you place it on your own player card. Then on a future turn, if you go to the headquarters, essentially you're locking them up, and since it was a red mobster, you would collect this token. Once all 3 of those tokens are collected, the last person that did it will get to see the weapon. Of course, everybody would get a suspect card. Now, if you end your turn, you're in these last 6 spots that are red, you can elect to remove your car pawn from the game and you're done. That is if you think you know who it is. Once all players have done this, the game will end, so some players will still continue to take turns while you're out. Then all players are going to secretly select who they think the murderer is with their cube, and then they all simultaneously reveal. Then the murderer will be revealed to everyone. If only one person got it right, they win. If multiple players got it right, whoever's the higher rank will win. Now in the cooperative version, you use the opposite side of the player aids, and you use the cooperative depending on the player count, certain detectives, and now you only have certain actions. So you need to work together and coordinate because you won't have every action possible to you, so you really need to work together. So you're just trying to find out the murderer. As long as one of your time cubes are within the last 6 spots, you can as a group decide that you're ready to try to solve it. And you're either going to win or lose together. Now in the 2-player variant, there's actually less witnesses and less informants. And the solo game is like playing a 2-player cooperative game, except you're running 2 characters. Well, there you have tiny epic crimes, and as I showed in the overview, you'll be managing your actions, the time of those actions, and deducing the actual murderer. Now, if you'd like to see the most up-to-date art and components and all the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me right in the description of this video. Now, that's going to take you directly to the Kickstarter project page, and I'm sure that Gamelyn Games would love your support.